Hello, hi, and welcome. If you're new here, my name is Sarah and this is Wicked Reading. I am so excited to film this video. I am just totally craving fall. It is still about 85 degrees out where I'm at, but we're approaching. I feel like September is the start to fall, and so I wanted to share with you guys my seasonal TBR that I have picked out for fall. Now, I'm prefacing this by saying I use the term TBR, to be read, very loosely. I have a stack of books that I feel like I will definitely want to read and have intention to read, but I am a mood reader. I don't stick to my TBRs 100% most of the time. I've been better at them, been able to better gauge what I am going to be into. But so that being said, I might not actually get to all of these, and honestly, I will probably end up reading a few books that won't be on this list. But I feel good about this stack. These are my best intended hopeful books for the fall season. Oh, and also I should say, a lot of books that I decide to read, I don't look too deep into them. I'll hear a few words that I like of people explaining them, and I have my few trigger words that I like, and I will jump into a book and buy it after that. So I will probably give very poor synopsis of these books. Some of the books I truly don't know anything about, which you will see. Other books I loosely know what they're about. I'm much better at giving summaries after I've read said book. So I apologize in advance, and I'm warning you now that if you want a really clean, very precise synopsis of these books, I'm not your girl for it. I'm gonna do my best to tell you guys what some of these books are about. I might get some of the things wrong. So if any of the books seem slightly interesting to you, I do recommend reading the synopsis on your own just to make sure. I'm gonna go through them in genres. So we're gonna start with horror because being the fall season, being October, there's definitely more horror here than anything else. So let's go ahead and get into it. So right off the gate, this book was on my TBR last fall or winter. I think it was winter, and I didn't get to it, and I really just need to, but the premise really doesn't speak to me, so I don't know why I bought it. But I've heard such great things about this author, so I really just need to bite the bullet and read this book and start off with her works. And that is Gallows Hill by Darcy Coates. This is pretty much haunted house, but at a winery. We have the Hall family who has owned this winery for generations. Two of the people of this family go into the winery and are found dead the next day. This causes a lot of whispers within the town saying a curse has been awoken. The daughter of these two people, what's her name? Margot Hall has to go to this winery, and she may start uncovering some secrets to the house. It says, alone in the sprawling, dilapidated building, Margot is forced to come face to face with the horrors of the past and realize that she may be the next victim of a house that never rests. So might be ghost, might be haunted past. We'll see. I don't know. This one, I'm gonna be honest, I'm kind of forcing myself to read. I just haven't had luck with haunted house stories. If you have a haunted house story that totally did it for you, let me know in the comments down below. I need some haunted house recommendations because I want to read more haunted house stories, but there's so many of them and I just don't know where to start. But I'm going to try to start here. Next up, I have a bunch of slashers. So let's get into those. First, I have My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. I have been sitting on this one for a while now. I really just need to get into it. I don't really know much of the premise other than it's a slasher. I think our main character is a big horror movie buff, so I think that there's a lot of horror pop culture references, which is super fun. I love books that do that. But other than that, I really don't know anything else. I have read The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, and I did really like that book, but I struggle a little bit with his writing style. It's very unique. If you've read one of his books, you know what I mean. He just writes very different than a lot of people, pretty much than anybody else I've ever read from, so I do kind of struggle with his books at times, but I did enjoy that one, so we'll see with this one. I know that Don't Curse the Reaper, is that what it's called? That's the sequel that just came out this year to this book, so I really got to get to this, and maybe I'll get to that, and I think that there's supposed to be a third book in the series, so yeah. Anyways, My Heart is a Chainsaw. The next slasher I have is The Cotton Candy Massacre by Christopher Robertson. This is pretty much just a slasher that takes place in a carnival. And that's all I know about it. The synopsis really doesn't say much. I think we're going to be following multiple POVs and multiple characters. But that's it. That's all I got on this one. Next on my list, I have Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Cesari. I don't know how to say his last name at all. I apologize. But this is also a slasher. This is the only YA book, I think. The only YA book that I have on my list. In this book, there was a party held by the juniors and seniors in a factory. One of these kids ends up dying at this party, and the factory is then shut down. After this, the town is very divided, and the older generation blames the kids for everything that happened, and it seems like it becomes this kind of battle between the old generation and the newer generation in this town. Then a homicidal clown ends up making an appearance, and the slashing begins. There is a sequel to this, which we will see if I enjoy this enough to read the sequel. I just thought it was a perfect, just getting into the fall type of book. Cornfields kind of make me think of corn mazes, which makes me think of all types of like fall festival things that go on during the fall months. So this is on the list. Next on my list, I don't quite know how to categorize this one, and that is Tastes Like Candy by Ivy Tholen. I had initially thought that this was a slasher, but upon reading the back, it sounds a little bit more convoluted than that. I think it has more to do with a person who seems to be able to see ghosts, and these ghosts are actually attacking people, and she herself is like haunted by this gift. And it says that she wakes up in the middle of the night and a dead man hovers in her living room. And it just says that with the help of a stranger who seems to know more about Elodie than she knows about herself, she must learn the truth that sometimes the living can be more dangerous than the dead. So I don't know. It sounds much more like a ghost story than I originally thought. And I think it ties in a little bit of like mental health. Are the ghosts real? I don't know. It might play into that. We will see. The next two books I have are a little bit more on, I would say, like the cozy horror side. Maybe. And the first one I have is Cackle by Rachel Harrison. This is about a girl named Annie who decides to dump her boyfriend, get her own place, kind of get a fresh start in a small town after she leaves Manhattan. Within this town, she ends up meeting a girl named Sophie, and they become friends. But she kind of realizes how Sophie is looked at and treated in the town, and Sophie's a little bit different, and Sophie might just be a witch. So I read Such Sharp Teeth by Rachel Harrison, and I absolutely loved it. That was a 5-star read for me. I adored it. I thought it was great. That one was very cozy horror, where there's things in the book that are like horror elements. It has to do with like a werewolf, but it's not really like a scary or a spooky book. So I'm thinking that this is going to be kind of similar to that, where we have like this kind of horror aspect, like a witch, but I think it's going to be much more about maybe female friendship, a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, a little bit more fun. I really liked Rachel Harrison's writing and approach in Such Sharp Teeth, so I'm really hoping to get the same feel from this book, and I'm excited to get to it. Next, I have We Stole Our Souls by Grady Hendrix. And again, Grady Hendrix tends to be kind of a less serious horror writer, and so I think that this is going to be a little bit along those lines. This book has to deal with a metal band that broke up, and years later there's an attempt to get the band back together, and for our character to get revenge on the reason that she thinks that the band broke up in the first place. That's really all I have. I really don't know what to expect with this book, but I do really like Grady Hendrix writing so far from what I've read. I've only ever actually read My Best Friend's Exorcism by him, but I loved that. I gave that 5 stars, and I just wanted kind of something with music festival vibes. This is probably a little bit more summer, so I'll read it sooner than later. I've been eyeballing it for some time now since I bought it, and so it's on the list. So the next 2 books I have, I'm categorizing them as like an unhinged woman. I don't know if that's super true, but that's what I think that these books are going to end up being. And the first one is Death in Her Hands by Otessa Moshfegh. This book has to do with our main character, who is an older woman. She finds a note in the woods that says, "Her name is Magda. Nobody will ever know who killed her. It wasn't me. Here is her dead body." But there's no dead body around this note, and our main character ends up becoming very obsessed with what this note means and what it's referring to. And yeah, we're supposed to have quite an unreliable narrator, so I really don't know what direction this book takes, but I'm excited to find out. Next, I have Jawbone by Monica Ojeda. I don't know at all what this book's really about. It just says, Fernanda and Annalise are so close they are practically sisters. A double image, inseparable. So how does Fernanda end up bound on the floor of a deserted cabin, held hostage by one of her teachers, and estranged from Annalise? So that's all I'm going in with. These two also, I should have said, lean more kind of like fiction, but lean into horror. So that's why I have them here. But they are like technically just under the fiction, but it's more of a literary fiction type of horror, I think. I don't know. I've heard it's pretty bizarre, which I love, and it sounds like we're gonna have some unhinged women in this situation, so yeah. Actually, before I forget, I meant to do this in the beginning because I knew I was gonna forget, but it actually ties in good with my unhinged women category. And I do plan on reading Rouge by Mona Awad. That is releasing, I forget, September something, September 1st, I don't remember. It's releasing in September, and I will be buying it as soon as I can and reading that. I literally have no idea what this is about. No idea, but it's by Mona Awad. So I'm assuming it's going to be pretty crazy and bizarre, and there will probably also be an unhinged woman in the book. I don't want to know what the book's about. I'm just going to go into it. The cover is gorgeous and I'm excited. Bunny was my absolute #1 favorite book that I read in 2022. So I'm hoping it is also a 5-star for me, but we will see. Next, I will do fantasy. I only have a few here because all the fantasy I picked out are quite chunky. So first up, I have Children of Fallen Gods by Carissa Broadbent. This is a rollover from my summer TBR. I did not end up getting to this, and I really need to. I really want to. Before I get ahead of myself, this is the second book in the War of Lost Hearts trilogy. The first book is Daughter of No Worlds. This here is the second book. So I really want to finish this series by the end of the year. So I'm hoping to read this one in the next few months, and then probably the third one within winter. These books honestly read pretty fast. So while it is pretty chunky, it is just under 600 pages. Or no, it's actually just over 600 pages. They do read pretty quick, and I really just need to do it. Yeah, so it's on the list. The first book, Daughter of No Worlds, we are introduced to our main character, Tisana, who is actually a slave. She ends up escaping her situation and decides to run off to what is called the Orders, which is this group of magical beings that are supposed to, if I remember correctly, oversee that like magic isn't being misused, something like that. I don't really remember now, which means I really need to finish this series before I forget everything. But she is actually like half, I forget what they call her. She's like half magic somehow. I don't remember the exact term that they use in the series. Ugh. But she's like half whatever magical, so she becomes an apprentice to this guy named Max. It does become more of a fantasy romance, much more like romantasy. This is much more, at least the first one was much more romance focused. The world building is pretty minimal, at least as of yet. And then she wants to return to there and free all the rest of the slaves and pretty much overturn this whole like slavery situation in this world. I think I got it. I think that was it. The next fantasy I have is Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas. This is, oh, I don't even know. It's the third to last book in the series. So whatever number that is. I do have the audiobook on Audible prepped and ready to go because the books are getting quite thick. This is just under 700 pages. So this is within the world of the Throne of Glass series. If you haven't heard of that, the first book is called Throne of Glass, and it follows our main character, Selena Sardathian, who in that book is being released from a prison, and she is put into a competition to become the king's champion, and if she becomes a king champion, she doesn't have to go back to prison and is free in a way. And then it just kind of follows from there. The series is very long and it gets into like way more stuff. We deal with witches, we have demons, there's fae, there's magic, there's corrupt politicians. So there's a lot going on in this series. So that synopsis of the first book is just such a fraction of the series as a total. But that is what you go in starting with. But I do recommend starting with the Assassin's Blade. I think it's important, and I think you should always start with that. But anyways, so I gotta read Empire of Storms. Next and final fantasy that I technically have on this list is Empire of the Vampire by J. Kristoff. This is very chunky, coming in at just over 700 pages. I truly actually also don't know what this has to do with. Let's look a little bit actually. It has been 27 long years since the last sunrise. For nearly 3 decades, vampires have waged war against humanity, building their eternal empire even as they tear down our own. Now only a few tiny sparks of light endure a sea of darkness. Gabriel de Leon is Silver Saint, a member of a holy brotherhood dedicated to defending realm and church from the creatures of the night. But even the Silver Order could not stem the tide once daylight failed us, and now only Gabriel remains. Imprisoned by the very monsters he vowed to destroy, the last Silver Saint is forced to tell his story, a story of legendary battles and forbidden love, of faith lost and friendships won, of the wars of the blood and the forever king, and the quest for humanity's last remaining hope, the Holy Grail. So I don't know what this is about. I don't know what this is about. Vampires versus humans. That's all I got. The sequel, I don't know if it's a duology. I don't know if that's like the last one, but the sequel did come out this year as well. And I've had this for a long time now, like a year at least, so I really have to read it. I'm just intimidated because it's so big, but I really wanted something with vampires on my list. November to me is very vampire feeling for some reason, so I'll probably read this in November. So we're down to our last 3 books, which are kind of random and each their own category. So I have The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Haro. This is kind of a historical feminist literature book, I would say. In this book, I believe we are following 2 timelines, one that takes place in 1866 and one in present day. There may even be a third one that takes place longer ago, but we follow the story of a few different women and their trials and tribulations as women, and I think that their stories intersect. And there's a tie-in of witches in New Salem along with suffragists, so kind of like feminism throughout history and how that kind of links together, I think. I hope that that's what it kind of does. Nonetheless, I'm really excited. This was on a TBR previously, and I just didn't get to it, but I think fall is definitely the time for it. Next, I really wanted to include some type of dark academia, and for that I picked out The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. All I know with this one, and I know that this is a really popular one, but I don't tend to like pay attention when people talk about this book for some reason, but all I know about this one is it's dealing with 6 magicians, and I think that they're in a kind of competition to get into like either an elite group or elite status, something like that. But nonetheless, we have this competition that these magicians are competing in. And I think we have all like very morally gray, somewhat unlikable characters, but it has a very like dark academia type of feel to it. I have not read many dark academia books at all. The only other book that I can think of right now that I've read was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, and I'm pretty sure that people who read a lot of dark academia don't really consider that very academia, but I don't know. So if you have any recommendations for dark academia books, please put them in the comments. I really want to find a few more. I feel like fall is like the perfect time for that, even winter. So I definitely want to get some options and expand my horizons when it comes to that genre. Lastly, I had so many dark books, so many horror, that I wanted to pick one out that was kind of a little fluffy, but it's a toxic fluffy, and that is Magnolia Parks, A Long Way Home by Jessa Hastings. This is the sequel to Magnolia Parks, but technically the third book within the Magnolia Parks series. But this one is the sequel to Magnolia's story in particular. I'm like so hesitant to get into this one because I loved Magnolia Parks. 5 out of 5, loved it. It is a very toxic type of relationship, but the series follows this group of very rich socialites and they kind of date around their friend group. Magnolia Parks is one of those girls in that friend group, and in Magnolia Parks we kind of hone in on her and BJ's relationship, and they are just very kind of like toxic, very together, not together, together, not together, kind of purposely pushing each other's buttons, yada yada. So this is like the follow-up to her story. But while I loved Magnolia Parks, the second book, Daisy Hates, was an absolute dumpster fire to me. I borderline just despise that book, and it makes me more hesitant to jump back into this world, which totally sucks. But I need to do it because I did really love Magnolia Parks. I think that the author also likes Magnolia Parks better, so I think that the story will be back to its really great writing and really good character work, whereas Daisy Hates, not so much in my personal opinion. But yeah, so I wanted something that was kind of fluffy, and this is what I picked out for that. So that is everything that I have picked out for my pile. As I said, I might not get to every single one of these. I really am gonna try. I do have some books on my Kindle that I didn't mention because with my Kindle, that is so mood specific. I really don't plan ahead what I read on my Kindle. I literally just pick that up when I'm ready to read something on the Kindle. So I do have some books downloaded on my Kindle that I may or may not get to as well that I just didn't mention in this video, but I already had kind of a lot, so I don't want to add more onto that list that I won't get to, because I do want to try to actually read these ones, because these are going to be the books that will be coming up in my vlogs and my future videos. So I like to try to stick to that so you guys know what to expect. So then if maybe you wanted to read something that you saw on here, you might want to kind of buddy read it with me, and I'd love that. Please do let me know what is on your guys' list, what you hope to read during the fall, or just like September if you do monthly TBRs. Let me know what you're reading in the future. I'd love to know. That is going to be everything from me. If you haven't yet, please give the video a like, subscribe if you're interested in future content, turn on the bell notification, all the fun YouTube things that help your girl out, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye!